I grew up neighbor of Philippines. They say where I shot Pai, that's sand beach, at top of the hill, in a clear day, you can see the northern island of the Philippines. And the movie has mentioned Manila twice, but I've never been here. This is the first time here. I'm very excited. I'm very excited to acquaint with you, because I know most of you are filmmakers. And I'm planning to do a movie here. I hope I get to make that movie. And IMAX is here in Manila, so I'm really looking forward to be friends with you, and we should have more communications. This is a very special movie for me. The movie you just saw. It took me 4 years of my life, 3,000 people working on the movies. 12 years ago, I read the book. I never thought that could be made into a movie. I never gave it a thought, actually. I was just inspired by the philosophy in the book. I'm a filmmaker, I'm a storyteller. But to me, this is a project, not so much talk about gods, but they examine the value of storytelling, our emotional connection to the unknown. It really drew me in. So when I was asked to do this movie 5 years ago, I really tried to crack it. I thought I don't know how to make this movie. It's like that irrational number of pi. It doesn't have a religion, because the artistic is a philosophical number, and the economic number, they will never meet. I will never see the circle. I know many of you are independent filmmakers. You must know how that works. But eventually, I had this silly thought. I thought if I had another dimension, maybe 3D, whatever, or a different way of writing, structure the story, maybe I can find a way to tell a story at the same time examining it. And I get in touch with a circular film structure, and also I get myself into 3D filmmaking, which is totally new cinematic language to me. It's a very inspiring film experience. I would like to think my whole career is like a film school. I never stopped learning about how movies made. I never stopped learning about myself, and never stopped learning about how the world works. I'm a curious filmmaker. I never conquer anything. I'm just a curious filmmaker, like I'm sure most of you. I hope I get to explore filmmaking further into the unknown territory, and one of them certainly is here in Manila. Looking forward to it. I saved the time in the discussion here. Very, very nice to meet you, and I hope I can be friends with you. Thank you.
Let me start with a few questions, and I think you sort of shaped the entire conversation we're going to have now by mentioning that there are a lot of independent film directors, both independent, both mainstream film directors in the audience now. No? In fact, a lot of Filipinos see this period as sort of a real sort of annus mirabilis for independent film. From Kai Magsanok for Rappler, and perhaps you can start with this, no? Independent substantial films still don't gain as much success as mainstream or slapstick films, and that's her term. What can you say about that?
I think it's important you keep making movies. I myself come from I have a strange, very unique career. I start make a mainstream movie, the slapstick as you may call it. Actually, my first 3 movies are close, especially Wedding Banquet. In America, you might call it schoolboy comedy, but in Taiwan, it's just a pretty bizarre comedy of manners, of family drama. So I was doing mainstream Taiwanese film, low budget, but I made it in New York as independent filmmaking. But it's also released outside of Taiwan, and I refuse to to mix into the Hollywood mix. I refuse to be called Hollywood. Even though I can make a very expensive movie, in some ways I still like to think I cannot be categorized. I want to have my independence. To me, independent doesn't mean cheap. I've done the cheapest movie, I've done the most expensive movie. I would like to have that freedom to express myself. Sometimes when you talk about independent, you have to be either wacky or very different in film language, austere, so you can hit a film festival, so you can get the attention from the film critics. I never really do that. I just express myself, doing what I think I do my best, find my audience, and somehow it works out for me. Sometimes I hit both, like Brokeback Mountain. After the Hulk, I thought I want to retire, but I don't want to retire with a big, expensive, not successful, angry movie. So I'll just grab anything. I thought Brokeback Mountain was a cheap movie, and the gay cowboys nobody would see. Strictly our house. I do whatever I want. I just don't want to get angry. I told the producer, if you want me to make this movie, just anybody get on my nerves, just get them away from me. That's all I'm asking. And who knows? That's one of my biggest commercial success. All of my biggest artistic, achievement, so to speak, winning awards. I also do well commercially, except the Ice Storm, which is a commercial flop, but I think critically acclaimed. You never know. I think movie is spiritual. As long as you're doing your best, I don't want to set boundary. I don't want to have a style. I think my most expensive movies, such as this one, such as The Hulk, I think of them as art films. And some of the smallest movie, like Wedding Banquet, or my very first movie, Pushing Hands. It was really, really cheap, less than $500,000 US dollars. They're actually, to me, they're a very commercial film, but, in terms of language. So to me, it doesn't really matters. I think independent in spirit, you just make the most. To me, making a pretty much impossible movie like this is no different than when I make my student films. I just try to make it work. I do want to mention, things get better. It's tougher in American filmmaking to make independent films. But for the world audience, for a lot of you like you are, this movie is very inspiring to me, how it works around the world. It didn't work so well in America, which used to be the leader of the market. The whole world sort of stood up for themselves. 85% of the income come from outside of North America. Even in North America, Canada was better than America. So I think that's good news for all of us. Many movies in the established film language and business, such as Hollywood language, and you don't have to follow it, and you have a chance to make it and find your audience. You just have to be patient and little by little find where your audience are, and I think there are more chances of making movies.
What's interesting is that, to put it into context, you said that your first film, Pushing Hands, cost less than $500,000 to make. It's been widely publicized that Life of Pi cost upwards of $125 million.
Yeah, about 130, 25, 30, yeah.
Who's counting between the 105? But what's interesting is this represents a very sure and clear trajectory. In fact, a number of questions have revolved around this, from Philippine star Nathalie Tomada and from PEP, Jocelyn Di Maculangan and Noel Orsal have asked about an Asian director penetrating Hollywood that way and sort of obtaining a kind of trust that will yield $130 million in terms of funding and making it back. That's an incredible trajectory. Would you have any advice for other Asian filmmakers in the audience, Filipino Asian filmmakers?
Well, I think Hollywood kept changing. And there are filmmakers, they never really adjust to the way of Hollywood operates. I'm one of the person I can manage that. It's painful. There are times I work in China, like a couple movies I shot there, and the American press, Western press kept asking me, you know, do you have freedom to do what you want? All that sort of question. I expect me to say that no. But after a while I get irritated. I always tell them, you know, the most unfree place to make movie is America. Not politically, of course, but American film, particularly Hollywood, it's establishment. It's not only financially, it's film language, it's how things operate, ideology, all that, it has to function in certain ways. I think that bothers me. And I try to, movie after movie, I try to break away, but I also have to negotiate with it. So for those of you who wants to make bigger movies, of course nobody make movies like Americans. It's like if you're talented in contributing science, like let's say Space Shuttle, you have to work in America. If you're a great basketball player, you want to play in the NBA, it's the major league. But there's a certain culture and way of thinking, operating, that you have to adapt and deal with. You can work against it, but you cannot ignore it. For those of you who are interested in bigger, sort of more full, bigger filmmaking and more theater, comes to a theater near you, which means mainstream movies, broader appeals. If you're talented in that, you want to break into Hollywood, you have to know the operation, you have to know the film language, and you have to know how to deal with it. You don't want to be a slave of that culture, that establishment. You want to show something different. I cannot tell you in a few words, but you have to be aware of. You have to have good producer leads the way. You have to have studio believe in your innovations. But as I said, I think these days, most movies are pretty boring. They didn't really know what to do. The whole world stand up, their culture, the way, like, this is a sad ending. This is like no way. They're prepared to lose a lot of money. The tiger don't look back. They keep saying, can you somehow make the tiger look back? I think for my skill, I'm so seasoned enough a director, even the tiger don't look back, still the tiger you could feel like the tiger think of fire, thinking of look back, it doesn't break the rule of the book, but still give the Western audience some kind of satisfaction. But I didn't do it. I'm a big shot.
Tempted to do it, no, not even.
Some younger director wouldn't be able to pull it off, but I'm strong enough to fight the fight. It turns out to Asians, they love this. We love sadness. We always lose. The movie show in China for like 4 weeks, they only give us 4 weeks. It's a lot better than America. It did nearly 100 million. So the whole world stand up. Russia stood up. I never see Russia as a market. I think the time is better now. There are different ways to express yourself. You don't have to conquer. You don't have to overcome. You don't have to like just figure out your problem and the whole world turn into Disney World. You don't have to follow the world. You can show a saddest ending, but still emotional. And okay, it's kind of lukewarm American, but you find your audience. You can survive. I think that is encouraging. Time is better now than before, as far as I can tell. But you have to know the American film language, how that is established in the world, because not only in America, the whole world watch movies in certain ways. That's establishment, the film, like how things goes, and genres and all that. You have to know your craft to either adapt or to negotiate to make a difference. You have to know your stuff. That's my advice. Don't look down on them that you don't have a chance. You have to deal with them, confront them.
That said, you have such a wide range of stories for your films. I mean, there's Brokeback Mountain, there's Lust Caution, there's Life of Pi. and the whole trilogy that you started out with. You are the first non-white person to win the Oscar for Best Director, and you won it twice. You have told Roger Ebert, and Don Housen of Rogue Magazine is kind enough to inform me this, that you still feel like an outsider. You're able to make whatever film, sort of virtually any film you want to make, any story you want to pick up. You've won more than 2 Oscars. You've also won for Best Foreign Film and for Best Visual Effects. Do you still feel like an outsider? Like there are strings that are being pulled that you're not involved with or you don't know?
Yeah, I think over the years I realized there's nothing I can do to change that. You know? My family, my parents went to Taiwan. I grew up in Taiwan, and we are the outsider. We're not related, Taiwanese. And I went to the American, of course, as a foreigner. Smaller, weaker, whatever. Everybody seems to be smarter because I don't speak the language, so they look smarter to me. They sound smarter and they look bigger, so it's very intimidating. Then when I go back to China, we're Taiwanese. So I never really deeply rooted in any nationality or culture except the ancient traditional Chinese culture, which is kind of drifted away from us. You know? It's like a dream. So I've been believing fantasy and I have faith in something that doesn't actually exist anymore. So that made me a drifter. The thing about outsider, after I make so many movies as outsider, the benefit is that you get to, because you're objective, you're not really attached to it, you get to the subtext really fast. Like people say, how do you do Ice Storm? It's like 20th century Americans, 70s experience in the suburbs, so accurate. You grew up in Taiwan, how did that happen? To me, those are, I don't know why that's difficult. Because I see the subtext. I see the subtext right away. On the contrary, when I make Chinese film, it's very hard for me to see the subtext, what the theme, what the movie is really about, the undercurrent. But the text I'm familiar with. On the other hand, when I'm outsider, the text, I have to be diligently adapt, learning and checking with filmmakers. You know, I didn't make those movies by myself overnight. I love learning, the learning curve. I love to work with people and get inspired and learn from them. I just made an Indian movie. To me, it's important they feel, the Indian audience feel ownership of this movie, which it happened. I'm very proud of that. I don't want to be an outsider, come in, impose my way of thinking. I want to learn from them. So being an outsider, I think accuracy is actually easy because you don't assume you know. You diligently do your study, your research, and you're very careful about accuracy. The subtext, you see right away, actually that's a benefit. The disadvantage, of course, is the culture, the mood of it. How do you smell like it? You know, how do you smell Wyoming? I don't know, gay cowboys, how does that feel? A few shots, people grow up from there, they have tears in their eyes. How did that happen? How does it feel, the atmosphere of 70s American? I think that's harder. I have to admit I'm quite talented that way. I'm very good at guessing. And check with people, see if my second guess, the guess is kind of right on or not. I think at the end of the day, movie is inspiration. It's not about statement. It's like, I know this thing. I made a statement. I made a movie. You watch. It's really about inspiration. It's a provocation. I think you make it enough so people can make the movie in their head. I can never make a movie that's as good as how people imagine. So I do half of the job. I'm a skilled filmmaker. That's what I do. But the rest of the movie, you have to invite audience, project themselves, their fantasy, their emotion into the movie. It's how it plays in their head. For that, I'm merely a filmmaker. You know, I provide provocations. It's not like I know all these things all my life. It's filmmaking. I think that's the wonder of it, and this is something I love to do.
But what's interesting is, and you're being very modest, for example, about the way you seem to absorb these stories, because it's clear that what comes out is a sort of strangeness or otherness, and you're attracted to that kind of thing. Is that what inspires you? Because you worked on Split with James Seamus. You picked up a story from Annie Proulx.
It's
Jan
scary.
Martel wrote Life of Pi, and that's a book.
Yes, it's scary.
And, yeah.
Let me go back to Outsider a little bit. Outsider is scary. You don't have a sense of belonging, and everybody around you, or the potential audience or critics, they're very scary. But I think scary is good. It tends to do your best when you're scared. I think if I'm not scared, I can be lazy, and I'm afraid. My biggest fear is that I keep repeating myself and I lose my freshness. I'm not doing my best. Freshness is important. I feel like every movie I want to feel like virginal. It's like I make movie for the first time. I have to somehow put myself in that position. Yeah, scary is bad, but I'm also put myself in the insecurity and doing my best, and that makes me feel alright. Even the movie flopped, you're still doing your best. I think that's a wonderful thing. And being an outsider, I like to be accepted as an outsider. I want to feel alright being an outsider. I think hardly anybody has absolute culture root, race, or society that you can say this is exactly what I just want to stay there. Most people are forced to do that for solidarity of society, to deal with people. So politically is more powerful and sounding. But not all, most of us don't made up that way. We're made up with many different elements in life. And we can be all complicated, very rich and undecisive, and being outsider either one way or another. But I like to think that a more civilized way of dealing with each other is accept that. I assert myself as an outsider. I gradually make peace with that within myself, and I would like to be accepted that way. And anybody come out as an outsider, he doesn't have to be categorized in certain ways. I will accept him and appreciate what he can offer.
And that comes out, very clearly in your films also, because, well, of course, they're about outsiders. But for example, Kai Magsanap from Rappler calls you the guru of magic realism filmmaking, and the Hulk, Crouching Tiger, and these are Life of Pi, especially. Do you really sort of force yourself to go out on a limb, and then are you attracted to this kind of magic, or is it even magic for you?
I try not to think about it. If I understand it, I probably won't make it. I want to keep curious. I would like to think that we filmmakers have a special power that nobody will understand, even ourselves. So we can just do what we have to do, we're compelled to do. We want to stay there. I think sight and sound in the movie language is not verbal. When you talk about verbal and linguistic, you rationalize whatever you experience it, but movie is something different. In some ways, it's photogenic, it's photorealistic, it's the least elusive, but on the other hand, it's totally illusions. And I want to keep it that way. I think when you're locked up in a black box as these, and share experience and going through something you're secretly playing, like somebody else doing it, it's not me. You don't have to be responsible. Through that escape, actually, through pretense, you touch the truth. I think there's a deeper level of whether you're making artistic film or you're making a slapstick, guilt pleasure, or very violent action movie, what have you, or melodrama, you cry your eyes out, or a happy ending movie, you get what you're wishing for. And whatever, we're making a different level, I think a truthful level of communication. You don't feel lonely. It's very satisfying. I would like to keep that a mystery. Every movie before I pick on, I don't know why I'm attracted to it. Like, I grew up in Taiwan. What do I have common with a gay cowboy in Wyoming? Like, but I read the short story, I cried. What hit me? And I tried to find out with the movies. And it's a very satisfying experience. And I went to different places. Emotionally, I get attached to it. As a filmmaker, I have many satisfaction working with brilliant filmmakers, go to different places. When a movie comes out, I'll be forced to explain what it's about, why do you make that movie? And I have to come up with an explanation. In the beginning, I didn't really know how to talk about a movie. And then I start to read comments and critics, and I began to good at talking about the movie. And eventually, it's like a psychotherapy. It's like therapeutic. And I said, no, I do a lot of interviews for months. If it's getting into academic campaign, it will add 6 months work to it. You talk about it thousands of times, each question thousands of times, and you begin to believe in what you're saying. And so that's why you make the movie. And then I look for the next mystery. And for me, once I talk about it, that's sort of over for me.
That's interesting because what another point of interest is that you get a lot of your stories from books, Sense and Sensibility for one, of course, Life of Pi. And these are not cinematic movies per se, no? That said, do you have any film heroes, or do you get any inspiration from other filmmakers? Or is it just you and the material?
A lot. It's a long list. I cannot even give you a top 5. Right now I'm into the Kubrick sort of mode.
Sure, of course.
But it changes. There are a couple of times movies I was into Hitchcock.
Okay.
And in the beginning, Ozu would be Italian neo-realism movie would be my models. It shifts. I don't know why I keep changing. I don't know. To be honest with you, maybe I'm afraid to be cast. Maybe that's just I'm a curious person. I like to keep adventure. I don't know. I just keep moving.
And I think that's something
book is good. I had to write my first 2-3 movies because I was young and nobody gave me scripts. And I had to write. I thought writing was really painful. You're alone. The writers say, how do you do your work? How do you deal with so many people? I just have to type it down, or write whatever I imagine, and that's it. And to me, it's the opposite. When you work with people, you get all sorts. You watch locations, you do your research, you get all sorts of inspirations. Books are wonderful. They've done their research. 3 years, 5 years in the writing. This is already a lot of material for you. But writing, you're facing something blank. You have to make up everything. To me, that's lonely and painful. So once I'm established, I'm happy to be pitched. I don't have to write anymore. But I do work very closely with the writer. To me, I would say, aside from Brokeback Mountain, the books I choose not necessarily my favorite books, because they make me want to do something cinematically, not because the words, the book itself attract me. Of course, they have to
something
be good
cinematic
enough.
in the material.
Something it hits me, like the Ice Storm, for example. It's obviously not. It doesn't have a story. It's not movie material. I don't know. We got the book for like $1,000. Like Rich, nobody wanted that book as a movie. But when I read it, I didn't read it as a movie material. It was just a friend of mine said he liked that new writer. So this is the second book I read. Page 200 is one image of the kid get electrified and slide down the icy road, and there's this picture hit me, and I feel like, what do I have to do to get to that point, to get what I feel when I read the book? Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, the last image of the girl flying down to the cloud. It was the last paragraph of it's a Tom book. and I feel like I want to make that movie, and I don't know why. I don't want to lock into literature because you're so revered about what you read. It would be very hard to make a movie. But I like to be inspired by a book, then put that aside. And I often tell my crew that the book, no matter how revered you are, like Life of Pi, it's a great book, a bestseller, and lots of fans, very intimidating. I said, this is the blueprint, this is the beginning of our journey, not the end. I refuse to be a translator to a book into cinema. I think I chose them because they made me want to do something cinematically. And no, we bought the book, so I just snatched any good idea and put aside anything. I didn't care. I had that freedom. Sometimes I get along with the writer, sometimes I don't, but I'll tell them, it's your book, it's my movie. See you in premiere.
Here's the $1,000, you know.
The next movie is my original idea. It's no book.
But you just spoke a little bit about your next movie. You know. That's a proverbial next mountain for every director. And I remember you talking about wanting to quit, you know, or planning to quit actually after one of your old, after the Hulk. And I've also read that somewhere else. But you've gone on and made movie after movie. Since nobody can predict what kind of movie you're going to make next, what kind of movie do you still dream? What kind of movies do you still dream of making? And why have you not quit?
I don't have a checklist. Whatever, I never develop. I think I'm a unique filmmaker. Most filmmakers, they have a few things in development, and they choose which one is right. And sometimes they give away the things they developed, they don't want to do, and produce that movie. I never do that. I'm a one movie at a time kind of guy. And once I'm in the pre-production, I stop reading. I don't care what people say, unless it's really, really important, like Brad Pitt sent you the script, you better read it. Other than that, I just going, the movie turned to be my life. And somehow, toward the end, it leads to the next thing. Whether something pop up, catch my attention. I think they catch my attention because it's extension of the movie I'm making. I think one thing will lead to the next. They're my lives. That's the way I live my life. I cannot imagine how my life is without movie making. One thing I know my wife would kick me out of the house. That's a big reason. I'm not joking. Between movies, I'm like this at home.
Are you between movies?
I'm like no good for anything. And she would not tolerate me. Go ahead, make another movie. I think as long as I still have the stamina to make movie, I think I still want to make it. Since Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, every movie there will be a few times during making that I said, the show must go on. If I can live through this one, finally I'll just stop. Because in making movie, you play with your nerves. And you have to deal with a lot of personalities. Sometimes it can get to you. Making movies is fun, but sometimes dealing with people is not fun. It reminds you of reality. This world has gravity. No matter how much you can fly, like Crouching Tiger and Dragon, you still have to land and you have to deal with people. And the more experience I have, the more I see where people come from. It can get really irritating. There are good times, there are bad times. It can get on your nerve, and I will have problems sleeping. Those times, I will think about quitting, but I still want to make movies. I don't know what kept me up. I feel like I'm the slave, not a master of filmmaking. When a movie wants to see the audience, they give me a call. I got possessed. There are a couple of movies I thought, go away, I don't want to do you, just leave me alone. I don't want to be your media person, the medium, just leave me alone. And I couldn't. For the young filmmakers, I think unless you feel that way, maybe you shouldn't make movies. Because for people who I know make movies, they're that kind. They don't know what makes them keep making movies. They just have to do it. We're their slaves.
That note, we'd like to thank you for making movies, and I think I speak on behalf of the audience in begging you to keep making movies. So thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Andy.